It's a brand new year and a brand new program. This is Before Bedtime. On this program, we bring you conversations from around the world on nuggets you can ponder while you take your rest from the day's activities. Welcome to a beautiful 2024 and also the beginning of our conversations on this show. Today, we are going to Canada. We are traveling all the way to Canada, and we are touching base with an HR management leader who has over 10 years work experience. He's also a post-secondary professor. Now, he's going to help us understand. In Ghana, when we talk about a professor, that is a university level, ivory tower person. Now, he is talking about post-secondary professor. He'll help us understand what that means in the context of Canada's educational system. My guest on Before Bedtime today is Mr. Edward Nkyi. Thanks for joining me, my brother, and welcome. Happy New Year to you.
Many happy returns, Nana. Pleasure to meet you and sorry to join you on this program.
You are a post-secondary professor. Help us understand. In Africa, when we talk about professor, we are looking at that university scholar or ivory tower great, who has seen it or has done it or and all that. Are you also one of them?
that depends on where you are classifying the job. In Canada, everyone who teaches at the post-secondary level is a professor. So if you teach at the college level or you teach at the university level, a professor, most of the time also in the US. So usually anyone who is teaching at the post-secondary level will be called a professor. There are ranks also in the university, but in the college system, everybody is called a professor. In the university system, you may start with an assistant professor, and then you come to associate professor, and then you become a full professor. So there are 3 grades. But in the college system, there are no grades. So everybody is called a professor.
Yeah. Today, we are going to talk about opportunities in Canada. We are looking at education and also jobs for foreigners or, let's say, African migrants particularly, because I am operating from Africa. Let's start with the educational bit. Since you are already in the teaching field, I believe that starting that way will be much more at home with you. In terms of opportunities, for instance, I am looking at Canada, north, south, east, or west. Are there any specifics or are there any requirements that are specific to Canada that I need to know before I apply to school, either at the undergraduate or graduate level, or even postgraduate?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. Let me start off by saying that Canada is one of the leading destinations for international students. In the last couple of years, Canada has been welcoming a lot of international students. In the last 5 years specifically, almost every year, around 800,000 international students come to Canada to study for various programs at the post-secondary level. International students contribute a chunk of the population of the student population in Canada. Now, most of the colleges, especially private ones, you are just recruiting international students to get money to be able to operate their business. So we have some private colleges that are solely admitting international students. Some of them, they don't even admit domestic students. If I say domestic students who are within Canada. So some of them have really specialized in just recruiting and training international students and teaching some of those colleges. So if you are looking at maybe the student population, some of the colleges, you are looking at around maybe 5,000 students, all of them being international students. And most of them come from Asia and Africa, and then other parts of Europe and I would say Australia. Very few of them from Europe and Australia, but majority of them are from Asia. The leading countries are India, Philippines, and also Nepal and China. So that said, the national population, student population in Canada is very diverse. And at the university level, it tends to decrease a little bit compared to the college system because the colleges offer more opportunities to international students than the universities.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to programs, there are so many, and some of these programs are 1 year, 8 months, and then 2 years. And so every student who is looking for any opportunity in Canada could explore these programs to come to Canada. And the good thing about being a student in Canada is the fact that you are able to work whilst you are studying.
Okay.
And also, you'll be guaranteed of a postgraduate work permit after your studies. Most often than not, you do a 1 year program, you'll be getting a 1 year postgraduate permit.
Okay.
Now, some students decide to take a 2 year program or maybe finish a first year program, a 1 year certificate program, and then move on to another certificate program, maybe for another 1 year so that they can get a 3 year post-study permit. Now, after your post-graduate work permit, like after using the 3 years or 1 year on your postgraduate work permit, you can also apply to stay indefinitely in Canada. And that is I would say one of the major things that attract most students to come to Canada because they know that after getting their postgraduate work permits, they'll be able to apply for permanent residency in Canada and eventually become citizens after that.
Okay. Now, let's look at scholarships. A lot of us coming from within Africa by virtue of needs, lack of resources, and sometimes necessity, scholarships are very important, be it full or partial. I mean, for so many people, their interest might be on the full scholarships. But how does it work in Canada? Are there specific academic scores you need to get to be able to access a scholarship? Are there scholarships that are limited to certain nationalities, or everything is open and once you are able to put in a competitive application, you can be considered? How does it work?
So, generally speaking, there are many scholarships in Canada for various programs at the undergraduate level and also at the postgraduate level.
Okay.
The vast majority of the scholarships are available at the postgraduate level. At the undergraduate level, there are few full-time, full scholarships, and those are really, really competitive. So if you are looking for an undergraduate scholarship, full scholarship that provides full tuition and stipends, and maybe additional money for maybe ancillary fees and maybe books and stationery and all that, these scholarships are really, really competitive. And sometimes you may find maybe just about 5 10 in the whole university. So which makes it very, very, very competitive. That said, there are several partial scholarships and also bursaries that are available to international students at the undergraduate level. But these are not full scholarships. So partial scholarship could be maybe 5,000 off your tuition fees. And usually, if you are an international student, your tuition is really high. It's like maybe 4 or 5 times the domestic rate. So if the domestic students are paying maybe 2,000, as an international student, you may be paying maybe 10,000 or 12,000. So considering right now, the average tuition for international students is around 17,000. Okay, so if you are getting a partial scholarship of 5,000, that will still mean that you have to pay 12,000
Yeah.
as your teaching fees. That's for the term.
Yes.
I'm sorry, for the year.
For the
So
year.
for the year. So if you are paying 70,000 and you are getting 5,000 off, so you have 12,000 minus your living expenses. So for a single person, you'll be looking around close to 20,000 as your living expenses. So rent, utilities, books, transit, and other needs. So that will be roughly around like 32,000, even if you get a partial scholarship for the undergraduate degree. So if
Yeah.
you're not getting a partial scholarship and you are taking an undergraduate program, which is maybe 3 years or 4 years, so you are looking around maybe 40,000 every year. So that's 3 years, 120,000, 4 years, 160,000.
Wow.
So it's quite
Wow.
expensive to enroll in an undergraduate program in Canada if you're not maybe from a wealthy home, so to speak, right? But that said, there are very, very limited full-time scholarships, full scholarships. These are really, really competitive, and usually they are available in the sciences. That's
Okay.
from the sciences. If you are very, very lucky, you might get one of them. But that said, it's very, very competitive. I would say your chances of getting a full scholarship in an undergraduate program is maybe 3 out of 100. Very, very competitive.
Let's look at graduate studies or postgraduate studies.
Yes. So as I said earlier, most of the scholarships are available at the postgraduate level.
Okay.
And say if you get an admission to a postgraduate studies in Canada, 98% of the time you get a scholarship.
Wow.
So 98% in all cases you get a scholarship. And usually that will be a full scholarship. So Canadians usually admit you knowing that they will provide you with funding. So this is what happens usually. So let's say if a department like maybe sociology or political science is admitting international students.
Yes.
Usually, let's say they are admitted 20 students in the program. They would admit maybe 15 domestic students and then admit 5 international students. Now, they know that international students who are coming in have financial needs. So of the 5 students that they'll be admitting, they would automatically provide them with funding. And that will be full funding.
Okay.
So the funding is made up of so many things. There will be like international graduate fellowship, which every international student will be qualified for that. They would also include teaching assistantships and then sometimes research assistantships and also maybe some other generous package, money from the university, maybe money donated by philanthropic organizations to assist international students. So this will come in the overall package. So usually if you're an international student and you're admitted to the postgraduate level, let's say if your tuition is 17,000, you may end up getting about 30,000. So they take your tuition out, you may get like maybe 13,000 as your stipend. That will be spread out through research assistantship and also teaching assistantship.
Wow.
Or maybe other fellowship which you may not, be working. Yeah.
So if I can summarize all that you said, Canada expects that as an international student, you take the foundation at the undergraduate level in your country, and then you come to them for graduate or postgraduate studies so they can assist you to pay your fees.
Exactly. So that you just hit the nail by the head. Exactly. So because undergraduate programs tend to be very expensive, even the domestic students, they struggle to pay the tuition. You are looking at 4 years or 3 years program, right? So if the tuition is around 17,000 or 20,000, you are looking at 3 years, so that's 60,000. And you are spending 3 years. So cost of living for 3 years, every year estimated around 20,000. So that's also about 60,000. So put together, that's about 120,000. I mean, for 3 years. So if it's 4 years, about 160,000. And usually they want to see this money in your bank account, because if your sponsor is bringing you to take an undergraduate program, they want to see this money in the sponsor's account. And how many people can see 160,000 in their bank accounts in Ghana or
That's a lot.
Nigeria or other place?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's quite a lot. And also the scholarships are very, very limited. And even if they are offering that, they are enough the tuition. So you still need to cover the remaining amounts. And that is why I would suggest that if you get an opportunity and you don't have the means, then do the undergraduate program in the home country and look for a master's program. Now, one thing I have to add is that the master's program are very competitive because the universities all the time, I would say 90% of the situation, they would provide you with funding. So if they are providing you with funding, then it means that they have to select the best out of the pool. So if, let's say, the department is offering 4 students to international students who are going to be funded, that will mean that all the countries and all the applicants from the various countries are going to compete for the first lot. So the lucky ones who are admitted would get, the full funding to be in the, university.
How true is this statement? I have heard that in Canada, when you get admission to the university and you are married, once you are given your visa, your spouse automatically qualifies for a work permit to join you. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. 100% correct. So we have a spousal visa. So let's say if I was given a study permit, then my wife qualifies automatically for work permits. And that is going to be tied to the expiration date of my study permit. So let's say my study permit was given for 3 years. My spouse will get 3 years work permits. So once I come to Canada, my wife can join me. So if I was given a study permit for 3 years,
yes,
my wife can also qualify for a 3-year, open work permit. It means that whilst I'm schooling, my wife is also able to work and get money to support my education. Equally, if I have enough money to bring maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of my children to Canada, equally, they will all be given visitor's visa. And all those 8 children, or 9 or 10, depending on the number of children that I have, can also have free education. Basic education in Canada. So by basic, I mean up to grade 12. They would attend school free. That's a good thing about Canada, because not many countries offer this. The UK used to do that, but now, there are a lot of restrictions on, spousal visas and all that. But Canada still does. So that's, the good incentive. So if, let's say, your wife applies for a postgraduate program and she's admitted, you are able to get the open work permits and come with your wife, and you would be working to support your wife. And if you have kids, you can come with the kids as well. Another good thing I have to add is that if you stay here for 18 months, all your children will qualify for child benefits. So child benefits will depend on the income that you are making. Usually, as a student, you're working so much, you will be limited to 20 hours. Quite recently, the government, gave a little bit of window to international students to work 40 hours. But that has been up now. But that said, every student in Canada is entitled to work 20 hours during the school term and then full-time hours during recess or vacations. So you, the student, you're able to work 20 hours a week. Your spouse is able to work on full-time, 40 hours, 45 hours, depending on where they are working. And then your kids are able to go to school free at the basic level. Now, once you live here, after 18 months, your children who are below 18 years will qualify for child benefits. So that will depend on your income. If your income is less, you may receive the full benefits. But if your income is higher, you may lose some of the benefits. So for each child, for example, if your income is low, so for each child who is under 18 years, depending on your income, if your income is below $20,000 a year, likely depending on the province you are staying, you could likely receive around $500 per child. And that can be extra money for you to take care of the children whilst you are schooling and not making enough income.
Now,
But
that
if you're
$500 per child is for what period? Is it per month, per week, per year?
It's monthly payment from the government. So that is meant to take care of the children. So once you are schooling and you're not making too much income as a student, after 18 months, that will be extra money for you to help with the children. But you can't get it until you've spent 18 months in Canada. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we've had enough of the education, but let's look at jobs. Jobs in Canada. Of course, not everybody will be traveling to Canada with school in mind. There are even some people, they use the school route, they get there and their attention gets diverted. Now, talking about jobs, what do I need to apply? Do I need a degree or a skill?
Well, it depends on the kind of job you are looking at. For example, if you are looking for an entry-level job, then you might need a degree or a diploma. If you are looking for any general labor job, then you may not necessarily need, any educational qualification like that. Most of the time, students who come in tend to find any job that they can do to make a living. So they decide to work in a retail shop, like Walmart or maybe No Frost or Superstore. That may not require you to have a degree or something like that. But if you're looking for an entry-level job, maybe as an admin assistant, then you may look for, you may have a diploma or maybe other educational qualification to be able to do that. Now, generally speaking, the unemployment rates in Canada is low compared to other developing countries. Currently, the unemployment rate sits around 5.8%, which is very every year, every month there are a lot of jobs being channeled, but it also depends on where you live. If you live in cities like Vancouver or Toronto, you're going to be struggling a little bit for job because there are so many people and not many opportunities are available in those areas because of the population. So just like you are living in Accra and there are too many people, everybody is competing for their little jobs.
That's right.
That will become available. So, but if you live in smaller areas or maybe other areas outside, maybe for example outside the GTA, that's Greater Toronto area, yes, you could be getting a lot of job opportunities. Like in my area, it's just in a small area of population 20,000 population. There are a lot of job opportunities. I see all the time jobs being posted, and sometimes employers are struggling to fill the positions. So sometimes they even offer some other incentives for others to come and join them. But that is not the case in Greater Toronto. It becomes very competitive. I teach a lot of students, and oftentimes I get the request to refer them to companies and all that. And the story I hear all the time is that they are struggling to find a job. But that's not the case in other smaller areas. So that depends on where you are. But that said, there are a lot of jobs because everyday jobs are being created. And so students, for example, could find so many jobs,
Mm.
not many entry-level jobs, as they are working, and
Yeah.
also they can find something to, put food on the table.
Mm. Okay. Now, talking about jobs, if I want to enter Canada to look for a job or migrate to work, am I looking at coming into Canada to start the search, or I should use the express entry route, the Canada express entry route?
Right. So that depends on your work background and your educational background, and
Okay.
most specifically also age. So Canada has a very attractive program called the Express Entry Program, which you can apply even while you are still in Ghana or any other country in the world. You don't necessarily need to be in Canada to apply for the Express Entry.
Yeah.
So the only requirement is that you should have worked in a NOC area. The NOC refers to National Occupation Classification.
Okay.
So the only requirement is that you should have worked in a NOC area that is in high demand. So for example, if I was living in Ghana and had worked as a doctor, that's a high demanding, so that's a NOC. So in those high demanding areas, if I had worked as a doctor for 1 year and I have, my degree in medicine, I can apply for an express entry program. The first requirement is that I have to write an exams and pass the exams requirements. Once I meet the requirements, also sometimes in some professions, age may matter, but in the medical profession especially, they don't really look at age because they are in great need of doctors, nurses, and other professionals. So they don't do the age. But in others, in the social sciences, yes, the age really matters. Usually, if you're above 35, you may start scoring 0, and that will not count, towards your experience. So once you are within the age requirement and you have the necessary education and you have the necessary experience, 1 year, either full-time or part-time equivalent.
Yeah.
Once you meet all those and you've passed the exams and it's a NOC in demand, you can apply for the express entry, you fill a profile, and then they do the draws. So once, let's say you meet the required pass mark. So for example, if they draw people who have scored 500, and once you score 500, automatically you'll be selected and you'll be given the invitation to apply for permanent residence. And usually that takes about 6 months. So you don't necessarily have to travel to Canada. And in fact, some occupations, people can even find a job outside Canada, and that can also help in the express entry. So for example, if you are applying for the express entry and already you have a job offer in hand from a Canadian employer, that can also fast track the whole process. Now, the other thing about immigration, especially if you are coming as a student, there are 2 ways you can apply to become a permanent resident in Canada if you are coming in as a student. Now, the first one is that when you finish your program, usually you'll be given a postgraduate work permit. So once you are given the postgraduate work permit, any experience that you gain after your studies will be seen as Canadian experience. And usually you need 1 year to apply for the Canadian experience. So for example, if I came in to do human resource management, and after my program, I got maybe 1 or 2 years or 3 years work permit. And maybe I landed a job in HR, which required me to use the certification that I obtained from Canada.
Yeah.
After 1 year, I can use that as experience plus to apply for permanent residence. If I live in, say, the province of Ontario, every province also has an immigration program. They call that, nominee program. So Ontario has the nominee program. Manitoba has the nominee program. Alberta has the nominee program. So these nominee programs are administered by the provinces. Now, usually, the major requirement is that you should have completed a 1 year education in that province where you are applying. So, for
Okay.
example, if you live in Ghana, and
Mm.
let's say you schooled in Greater Accra or Ashanti
Mm.
region,
Yeah.
then the Greater Accra, I mean, um, administration, or let's say in Ghana, Canada, it's called a province.
Yeah.
So in the Greater Accra region would have a nominee program. So
Mm-hmm.
once you schooled in Accra or any parts of Accra or
Yeah.
the Greater region, you will be eligible to apply for that nominee program. So
Okay.
they will nominate you as a provincial nominee, and then they will send you send your application to the national government or the federal government, and then they would endorse that and give you the permanent residence. So that's one of the best routes that students
So
often use.
on this one, if I let's say I took an online program with a Canadian institution, let's say for a year or two,
Mhm.
will that also qualify me for from the specific area where the institution is located?
Yes. So during COVID, the government implemented a pilot program for postgraduate work permit. They knew
Okay.
that most students could not come to Canada during the
Mm,
period to study. So, for example, if I lived in Ghana and maybe I applied for a program in Ontario, maybe at
mm,
Humber College, and I was successfully able to complete, I was successful in completing the program.
mm,
After the program, which was maybe online, most of the colleges and universities did, offer online programs during COVID. So
mm,
once the student was able to complete the full program and met all the requirements, they were also eligible for the postgraduate work permit, just like
mm.
they would have come in person to do the program.
Okay.
So most of the students who were outside during COVID and were able to complete their courses got the study permits. The postgraduate work permit to come to Canada and work. So I don't know for sure how that arrangement stands now because a lot of changes have happened in the
Mm,
past. I don't
mm.
know if it's still an option for students to do that. But that said, there are some programs that are hybrid where you have to do some of them in person and you have to do the rest online. That also qualifies for the postgraduate work permit as well.
Mm. In the midst of all this, working in Canada, studying in Canada, having an opportunity to work post graduation and all that. You talked about you could get what do you call it, indefinite stay beyond a certain level after you have graduated and worked for some time. Also, I am sure with the job angle also, there are also opportunities for you to stay longer and all that. At what point, is there a point that any of them or both of them can lead one to getting citizenship? Is there any point?
Yes. So usually when you become a permanent resident, that's when you get your indefinite stay.
Yes.
After 3 years of staying in Canada,
Mm,
you get your citizenship if you want to
okay.
apply.
Okay.
Most of the time, some people don't want to become citizens, maybe because of certain arrangements in the home country. So some
Okay.
countries don't recognize dual citizenship. So
Mm,
for some countries who don't recognize dual citizenship, maybe if you're a national of that country, you have to be very careful because once you apply to be a citizen in Canada, you may lose the citizenship of your nationality,
yeah.
right? So, for example, if Ghana was not a dual citizenship country, and
Mm,
let's say if I was from Ghana and I came to Canada and I got my permanent residence or indefinite stay, and after 3 years, I chose to be a Canadian citizen. If
mm,
Ghana did not have, that status of recognizing dual citizenship, then I
mm,
will lose my Ghanaian nationality, right? So
yeah.
those countries that don't have that, people in those countries would not take their citizenship because maybe
Mm.
they don't want to lose their citizenship.
And there are some who also want to come back and do politics.
Exactly. So in
Yes.
Ghana, there are some positions you can't hold when you have dual citizenship.
Yes,
So
you have
those
to
people will not
denounce the
take,
foreign citizenship.
yes. So those people will not take their citizenship,
Mm,
but you can remain a permanent resident as long as you are in Canada. And
mm,
sometimes I think if you leave Canada after 6 months, I don't know for sure, but I need to double check this. So don't take
okay,
me on this. But
that's fine.
as far as you are not outside the country for more than 6 months, you still maintain your permanent resident status.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say I've been in Canada and maybe I visited Ghana for about 6 months. As far as I come back to Canada, I'm still a permanent resident. But if I decide to leave Canada for maybe more than 6 months, then automatically you lose the permanent residence. But I mean, if you're a citizen, you can leave and come at any time. So that's the only reason why most people will take their citizenship, and also to be able to participate in, I mean, elections and other things. And also, I mean, the fact that there are some protections that come with being a citizen, right? So if there was a war in another country and you happen to be there, I mean, the government would take the responsibility to evacuate you as a Canadian citizen. So these are some of the things that people would look for when they want to become citizens. But that said, once you're a permanent resident or you have your indefinite, after 3 years, you can apply to be a citizen. There is just a little test that you have to take, citizenship test, and usually everybody who takes the test will pass. So it's just asking you some basic things about Canada. And once you pass that, you get oath and you become a citizen. Yeah.
This is interesting. These are very interesting insights. I'm curious, how long have you been there yourself to have learned all these things and mastered and mastered them so well?
Well, I've been in Canada for about 13 years.
Okay.
And I've learned a lot through the system. As I'm an immigrant myself, I had to go through the system. So I learned that. And also, I mean, I had interest in immigration as well. So at a point, I wanted to be an immigration consultant, but I mean, I decided to change course. So, yeah.
But when you got there, how did you adjust to your first winter experience? We want to know, because that is one thing most of us in Africa don't experience. At least majority of African countries do not have the winter reality. How did you adjust? How did you get used to it? Were you shaking? Were you freezing? Were you?
Well, for me, it wasn't a new experience because I lived in the UK before coming to Canada.
Okay.
And in fact, the part of UK where I lived was really cold. I lived in Hull, closer to Scotland. And that part of UK is really, really cold. So even I would say currently where I live in Canada, even though Canada is cold, where I lived in the UK comparatively, I would say that place was a little bit colder than Canada. But that said, there are some parts of Canada that are very, very cold. If you happen to live in Winnipeg or maybe further north, and you should expect to see the worst. The winter could sometimes go up to maybe minus 45. And yeah, but that said, if you're able to dress well, you can survive. It may be, the first shock will be coming here in the winter. But if you happen to come in the summer, and then gradually, as the weather is rolling out, you start listening according to the weather, you may get used to it. Maybe after 2-3, winters, you may be getting used to it. I remember, in the cold this afternoon with what I'm just wearing, and people were looking at me like I had my jacket in the car, and I was just out with this, and people were wearing layers and heavy jackets, and they were staring at me. I couldn't have done that in the first year, right? So
yeah,
as you
the system has gotten used to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do a casual walk through, let's say, master's programs across Canadian universities. Do they all demand thesis, or there are taught programs only?
Yes. So depending on the department you are applying, usually there are two options: thesis stream and then MRP, that's Master's Research Project stream. So the Master's Research stream are usually top programs, which is 1 year, and the thesis stream is 2 years. So that will be up to you to choose whether you want the top program or you want the thesis program. Now, usually the student will decide before they apply for the program, or whilst they're in the program, they can decide whether they want to go with a thesis stream or maybe go with the MRP or the hot stream. Each of them attracts funding. Like I said earlier on, once a university admits you for a postgraduate program in Canada, 98% they would give you scholarship. And the reason being that they usually reserve, very limited seats for international students who are pursuing postgraduate programs. And they understand the financial needs of international students. So every time they are making an offer to you, they are giving you funding. Even if it's not enough funding, it will be able to pay your tuition fees, and you still get maybe about 8,000 or 10,000 as living expenses for the year. So maybe 10,000 may not be enough for you to live on in the year, but you may have to add something to that, right? And usually they also have bursaries aside from the funding. I mean, they have some hardship bursaries which you can apply to offset some of your, educational expenses. So they offer that on top of the funding that they are providing you.
Yeah. Now, let me find this out. In Africa, a number of the scholarship of opportunities, if they must give it to you for you to go out there and study, the bond is that when you finish, you return home. I am curious, Canada is giving out a lot in financial aid to foreign students. What are they getting in return? Do they require that they satisfy certain conditions upon completion, or it is purely social service, philanthropic work?
So I would say that's an interesting question. So usually all postgraduate programs for international students, 98%, I would always say 98%, they are funded, right? So once they fund that, it comes through various sources. So one will be teaching assistantship, which you'll be teaching as a postgraduate student to earn that money. So for example, in my time, I was made a teaching assistant. So I was teaching 10 hours a week as a teaching assistant, and then I was getting that income, right? So that was not like money given to you for free.
That's right.
So that was teaching assistant, that was income. Now, the other funding had to do with fellowships. So, for example, I got an international fellowship, which was about 8,000 or so, if my memory serves me right. And then I got another fellowship that was about 5,000, making 13,000. Then plus my teaching assistantship. So all of them amounted to 22,500. So the teaching assistantship was money that was coming into my pocket, which I was working for. The rest were given to me, but they used that to pay the tuition. So the two other fellowships were not coming to my pocket, right? They were used to pay the tuition. But the teaching assistantship, I was working to get that. Or maybe sometimes if they give you research assistantship, you'll be working to get that. You may be doing some research for some professors, and then they'll pay that money. So usually the fellowships, you may not get the money in your pocket. They will be used to pay your tuition. But the teaching or research assistantship, that will come in your pocket because you'll be working for that. Now, that said, when you come to study in Canada, it contributes a lot to the economy because one, you're going to be renting. You're going to be buying stuff. You're going to be also working to help other employers. And also, the government gets a lot of benefit from you. You'll be paying taxes and all that. So at the end of the day, they are giving you the scholarship, but they are also getting benefits from you. And plus, decide to stay in Canada. That's going to be the biggest advantage for them because they need people to come here. Canada is a very big country, and the population is around 35 million. So you are looking at the size of the whole West Africa as the size of Canada, and the population is about 35,000. There are some provinces that are desperately looking for skills. People to come there. Go to the up north, Nunavut, Yukon, and those areas. They are desperately looking for people because of the weather situation or the climate situation there. People are not willing to relocate to those areas. And so they are in desperate need. And also the Atlantic provinces and all that. They are using various ways to attract people to come there. So sometimes even they lower their tuition just to
Mm.
attract international students to come there. I know if one chooses a university like Memorial University, their
Okay.
tuition rate is less than 3,000. For international students,
Mm.
it's comparatively the same as the domestic students. So international students pay almost the same rate as domestic students. So
Mm.
that is just to attract students to move to those provinces. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
I know that there are certain things I need to share with those who are looking for educational prospects in Canada. Um,
Mm.
I'm going to share a few tips because these are really important, especially
Okay.
those who are looking
Very
forward
well.
to. So usually because at the postgraduate level, because they're
Mm.
offering funding, it tends to be very competitive. You can
Mm.
imagine maybe forces at the department for all students who are from all over the world applying for maybe
Yes.
master's degree in political science or
Mm.
maybe sociology or social work or something like that. It
Mm.
tends to be very competitive. However, if you have a good graduating class, maybe first class
Mm.
or second,
Yeah.
you also need a very good statement of purpose. So your
Mm.
statement of purpose should be very good. And usually it should be dovetailed towards, your personal statement should be very good. And you should also get a good research, statement.
Okay.
Now,
That's
for
a
you to
research proposal.
research proposal.
Okay.
Now, I always encourage, would-be students to first review the faculty interest of the department that they want to apply the program.
Okay.
After reviewing the faculty profile, um, look for a faculty member whose research interests align with your research interest.
Mm.
Email that person, share with that person some of your experiences and your research interests, and get an explicit consent from that person that the person is intending to be your supervisor. So, for example, after maybe reviewing your profile, I can
Mm.
email you and say that, oh, I'm in Ghana. I'm looking into coming to maybe BC University, and I see that your research interests align with my research interests. Please, would you be happy to take me on as your student? If I get a chance to be there, would you be able to supervise a project like this? If the
Mm.
faculty member says yes in an email, ask permission to print that and add that to your application. That is really, really important because once the
Mm.
admission is reviewing your application, they know that your research interest can be taken care of
Yeah.
because already a faculty member have given an explicit consent about taking you on as a student.
Mm.
So that is also important. And also get good references from your professors.
Okay.
Uh, Usually, if you have completed school in the last 5 years, you
Mm.
need at least 2 academic references. You can use professional references, but the academic references hold a lot of weight.
Okay.
And also, um, from my experience, most often than not, students who tend to be teaching assistants
Mm.
oftentimes get the chance to be recruited into the master's program. That is
Okay.
not to say that if you are not a teaching assistant, you can get the chance to come and do a master's program. But most of the time they offer teaching assistants, and usually students who have experience being teaching assistants stand
Mm.
higher chances of being selected because they have the experience of being teaching assistant, and
Mm.
for that reason, they can also be getting that opportunity when they come to Canada to be teaching assistant. But that said, there have been a lot of cases where people who were not teaching assistants were recruited to be teaching assistants.
Mm.
Nobody was born to be a teacher, right? So
Yes.
you could have worked in maybe a banking sector, but
Mm.
they can still, um, give you a teaching assistantship position for you to start with.
Mm.
So that is also very important. So get some experience. I would say
Okay.
industry experience.
Right.
Can be in academia or in any other industry. That
Mm.
also helps a lot. So once
Mm.
you have been able to put all these things together, you stand a very higher chance of being selected. And once you are selected, 98% again, I will use that, you get the funding. And
Mm.
there are several universities and several programs in Canada that are providing funding. I would say one tip I would offer, usually don't go for the big investors. They tend to be very, very, very competitive. For example, if you are going to apply for, let's say, University of Toronto or McGill or maybe University of British Columbia, then you have to know that you're going to face a very stiff competition, because if offering 4 seats to all international students who are coming to the world, everybody wants to go to U of T, everybody wants to go to McGill, everybody wants to go to, UBC. So competition is going to be very tough, and you should be prepared for that. The good thing is that Canada, with the exception of McGill University and one or two other universities, all of them don't require GRE. All of them don't require SAT. So that's the good thing. They only look at your undergraduate program. And
what about IELTS?
That is only for those whose native language is not English. So, for example, if you completed your education in China, then you'll be required to write the IELTS academic. For most African countries, no, they don't require them to write the IELTS exams. Anything is very straightforward. It's about what you did at the university. In class, you don't need to write a GRE or SAT or any other entrance exams. For most people from Africa and Asia and other parts of the world, they don't have to write a GRE. So, some universities still require that. In some programs at the University of McGill, and I think one or two universities, they still require the GRE. But that said, 99% of the universities and colleges don't require the GRE and the SAT exams. So that is also, a good news for those who are looking to come and study in Canada.
Let me thank you for this conversation. It's been enlightening and it's been insightful. Destination Canada, live on Before Bedtime. We touch base with a post-secondary professor in Canada. He is also a human resource professional or practitioner in the same country. He's been in Canada for 13 years. The good thing is that, or one interesting thing about him is that he was my classmate in secondary school in Ghana here. And he decided to abandon Nkrober's Ghana for this long. We don't know how many more years he's going to live in Canada, but of course, his presence there has been of enormous help to us on this program Before Bedtime. Here we talk everything that will bring you some kind of information with which you can take to bed, brood over, reflect on, and think about. Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Edward Nkyi, for your time and the thoughts and information you have shared with us on Before Bedtime.
You're always welcome, Nana. It's a great pleasure to be on this platform and also to connect with you. It's been a long time since I spoke with you. And so for everybody who'll be watching, especially my Opoku mates, I just want to say hello to everybody. Please, let's connect on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever. Let's keep the network going. And I thank you for bringing me on this program. It's my pleasure.
Now, for every single Opoku connection you have, that is $1 Canadian. So you start doing the calculation. Thank you very much for being a part of us on Before Bedtime. I know it's bedtime. It's time for us to go to bed. But as you go to bed, think about these things. He's talked about education. He's talked about job. You do not just, you don't have to necessarily go to Canada in search of education. You could also go there in search of a job. Which of them is your option? The doors are open and they are ready to embrace and welcome those who qualify to be part of their society. Thanks for joining us and have a good night. We'll be back again next week with another episode. For now, we say good night to all of you. Bye.
Right, Nana. Thank you.